Welcome back to the Calculated Risk Podcast. I am Tyler Shoemaker, joined by a traveling Kelley Ford this week. Had to change up our schedule a little bit. Kelley's doing the Lord's work with the Horizon League where he works, so he is out of town. We're a little bit off schedule, but nonetheless, we have a great slate. Week 11 already upon us. Again, we say this every week. It's that time of year where every week we're going to have like huge conference titles, CFP impacts here. So Kelley, I'll let you kick us off here with our first marquee matchup. We're going to go Washington and Utah. Let's hear what the KFord ratings have to say about this one.
Yeah, Tyler, this game is definitely interesting because my numbers have Washington -8 in this one. Washington, of course, hanging up there in the top 5 of the CFP rankings. I have them number 3 in my most deserving rankings. I think they should be in the committee's top 4. But they're trending, if you look at the most recent weeks here from a power rating standpoint, slightly in the wrong direction. After the Oregon win a few weeks ago, I had Washington all the way up at number 8 in the power ratings. They're now number 13. They've fallen 4 football points per game in the actual raw rating since that time. So they're still favored in this game. They still have the better units. The offense is still really, really good. It's still a number 4 unit in the country. It's started the year number 7, jumped to number 5 almost immediately, and hasn't been outside the top 5 since. The defense, while it's still a much better unit than I projected coming into the year, this Washington defense for me coming in was number 50. I had some questions about it. Like I had questions about a lot of Pac-12 defenses. They have overachieved what I thought and kind of set the bar a little bit higher for themselves. Just a few weeks ago, though, they were up to as high as, the mid-20s, and now they're number 37 on the defensive side. So we're seeing a little bit of regression on the defensive side of the ball to a little bit closer to the level of play we expected coming into the year. Hasn't hurt the Huskies yet. I'm not suggesting it'll hurt them this week, but this Utah team is pretty darn good, and they're getting better. I'll get to that in a second. They've got to go at Oregon State next week before closing, of course, with the Apple Cup, and that's a game we talked a lot about Bedlam last week. We don't know when or if we're going to get it again. Same thing with the Apple Cup here. So there's going to be some extra charge emotion in that game too. So it's a tough end of the season here for Washington. If I flip it over to Utah, I mentioned Washington kind of trending the wrong way. Utah, listen, they don't have Cam Rising that we know now. We've known for a little bit that we won't have Cam Rising all year. This team is trending in the opposite direction. They're trending in the right direction, the positive direction as things stand right now. They're up about 2 points just from last week after just stomping Arizona State. Hey, Arizona State's not a very good team. Like, we get that. But my goodness, they demolished them here. They're up to number 21 in the power ratings. This defense, I said I had questions about some of the defenses of the Pac-12 coming into the year. The Utah defense was not one of them. They were top 25 for me. They were the number 1 defense in the Pac-12. And they have exceeded those expectations. They are number 11 for me currently nationally. They're number 1 in the Pac-12 still. The offense is getting better now. As low as number 66 about a month ago, they're now up to number 50. So these two teams, they're just trending in different directions, Tyler, from a predictive metric standpoint. Utah is also a team I feel is vastly underranked by the committee. I'd have them number 12 in my most deserving. The committee has them, I believe, number 18. I think that's the largest difference in that direction that I have based on my most deserving top 25 and the committee top 25. So I'm not saying that they have something to prove. They're not going to look at that and say, oh, number 18, that's disrespectful. I think Utah fans should actually be pretty happy that they are 7-2 on the year, a year that they haven't had Cam Rising at all, and they're number 18. Like, I actually think they're probably pretty happy. I suggest they should be a little ticked off, but they probably don't have that mindset. So I've got Washington in this game, -8. Seattle's a tough place to play. We've seen that before. Oregon experienced that. 28% chance that Utah wins this thing. If Washington wins, book your spot in Las Vegas. It's settled. If Utah wins, they remain in this mix, and it could really jumble that second spot if Utah wins, especially if USC knocks off Oregon later in the day as well.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think these teams are trending in opposite directions here. I mean, Washington has arguably the best win or maybe the second best win of the college football season, beating Oregon, who has looked awesome. But since that game, they just have not quite been right. I know they won last week against, USC, who the jury's still kind of out on. I mentioned going into that game, I wondered how much fight USC would have. They kind of proved me wrong there. They did show up and fight. I mean, they scored 42 points, but again, Washington's defense allowed 42 points in that one. So I don't know. I've got Washington number 14, Utah's number 29 in terms of my power ratings. In terms of the resumes, Washington's still number 3 in the resume ranking. I actually have Utah at number 20 in resume ranking, so definitely lower than you, and even lower than the committee has them. From a unit standpoint, my numbers are kind of way more polarized than yours. I've got the offense number 92, which, if you recall, when we talked about them a week or two ago, they were outside the top 100. So the offense is climbing. Still very bad in terms of my ratings, but number 92 on offense, but number 4 on defense. So much more polarized on both sides of the ball for Utah. Whereas Washington, number 10 on offense, number 33 on defense. So I project this game right at 10, Washington minus 10. The line currently sitting Washington minus 9.5. I project the total at 48, and the line currently sitting at 51. So I would have a slight lean to the under here, although I wouldn't want to play the under because as we mentioned, the Utah offense is kind of surging. The Washington defense is kind of falling apart. I don't know. I think that's a total that probably is going to be trending up. I don't know that I would want to play an under here, but that's where I'm at on this game. Kelley, any final thoughts here before we move on?
Should be a really good one. I'm excited. Can Washington avoid stubbing their toe? Because if Washington drops a game in the regular season here, that puts a lot more pressure on them in Las Vegas. We could have a situation, depending on where things happen elsewhere, where we have like a TCU of last year. Washington enters the Pac-12 championship game 12-0. They lose that game. Maybe they still get in. Now, it could be tough if Oregon has the same record as them and that Pac-12 championship game. Of course, Kansas State didn't have that last year over TCU, and things broke right for the Horned Frogs, other places as well. So we'll see. Washington has a little bit of pressure to try to get to 12-0 in the regular season to give them potentially a little bit of cushion in Las Vegas.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned their schedule here over the next 3 weeks, and my numbers basically say they're going to come out with 2.2 wins. So chances are they're going to drop one of these 3 games mathematically. So be curious to see if that can be Kyle Whittingham, who's been excellent as an underdog in his career. Moving on, big one in the SEC, Georgia and Ole Miss. Georgia coming off a huge win against Missouri last week, was kind of their first statement win of the season. Ole Miss is a team that I've mentioned on this show several times. Like, I've been uncomfortably high on them from a rating standpoint, but Kelley, I think your numbers are pretty high on them as well. I've got Georgia number 10 power rated, which is lower than most, but again, the numbers are the numbers. Ole Miss power rated number 13. From a resume standpoint, I've got Georgia number 7, and this is like my one qualm I have with the committee so far. Nothing in my numbers indicates Georgia should be number 2 in the country, but here we are. Ole Miss number 8. So this is number 7 versus number 8 in terms of resumes this week. So it's going to be a really good game in terms of how these units stack up. The Ole Miss offense, the best unit in the game by my numbers, they're number 8. The Ole Miss defense, a respectable number 26. You don't really think of Lane Kiffin and his teams as being even solid on defense, but this is a respectable defensive unit going against Georgia, who's very balanced, number 13 on offense, number 14 on defense. So, I mean, the biggest advantage in this game is going to be the Georgia offense against the Ole Miss defense, but the best unit in the game is going to be the Ole Miss offense. In terms of how my numbers see this game shaking out, I've got Georgia minus 3. The line currently sitting Georgia minus 10.5. So again, I'm just way lower than the market on Georgia, and I've generally been higher than the market on Ole Miss. So that explains kind of the 7.5 point discrepancy there. In terms of the total, it's currently sitting at 58, and I projected at 55.
Tyler, these two teams, I agree with a lot of what you said. A couple of just general points for me. These two teams haven't played since 2016. They've only played 5 times since 2002, and these are conference foes. Now, I know they're on opposite sides of the conference, different divisions. That's one of the few silver linings, Tyler, for me, of conference realignment, and there's not many, is that we're going to start playing everybody. At least the plan is start playing everybody in your conference a little bit more frequently. Now, the trade-off there, among other things, is you're going to lose some of those annual rivalries that you've built time and time again being in the same division. But I'm actually okay sacrificing a couple of those to get more balanced play against everybody in your conference. Again, that's one of the few silver linings of conference realignment. I'm looking for the positives here. You mentioned these teams are next to each other in your resume rankings. I am too. They are for me too, but they're actually flipped. I have Ole Miss number 6, and I have Georgia number 7. So I actually think Ole Miss should deserve to be ranked higher than Georgia, despite the fact Ole Miss does have a loss and Georgia does not. We know that number of losses shouldn't be the end all be all. I think the committee's trying to prove to us otherwise, and unfortunately they have the vote that matters. And so we'll keep preaching it, trying to get change here, but that's how I stack them up from a resume standpoint. Georgia, so I disagree a little bit, Tyler, with which unit is the best. I agree with 98% of the things you said. For me, I actually have Georgia as the better unit on both sides here. I give them the advantage on both sides of the ball. Georgia's number 7 in my power ratings. They have the number 5 defense for me and the number 6 offense. But I'm still not quite as high on Georgia this year as I have been in the past. The margins are really thin at the top of college football. And so when we're talking about Georgia, being number 7 in the power ratings, and from a blind test, you say, okay, yeah, that's pretty good. Not when the bar for Georgia in these most recent couple of years has been number 1, and you've been kind of going away from the pack a little bit. So Georgia doesn't have to be better than 2021 and 2022 versions of the Georgia team. They just have to be better than the teams they're playing this year, and my numbers continue to think that that's the case here. So I do give them the advantage on both sides of the ball. They are at home in this one. But for Ole Miss, this is a really good team, as you mentioned. They started the year number 18 for me. They've been ranked between 18 and number 11 all year. They're currently number 15 in the power ratings. Agree with you that the offense is the better of the 2 units, and it's not like they're far behind those Georgia units. I have them currently ranked number 10. They've been between number 7 and number 17 all year. So a very consistent offense that the model's been impressed with. The biggest cause for concern for me, and you touched on this, the Ole Miss defense. It's good, but it's not great. And is that going to be good enough on the road at Georgia this week? The Ole Miss defense currently number 29. The only other time this year that the Rebels defense went up against a opposing top 20 offense on the road, it was against Alabama in week 4, and that's their only loss on the year. So are they going to be able to slow down the Georgia offense, get enough stops to allow their offense to score enough points to win this game? My numbers project Georgia -7 in this one, 69% chance that the Dogs win the game outright. This is number 12 on my overall watchability scores list of all regular season games this year, Tyler. It's got a watchability score of 9.6. Again, only 11 regular season games in the entire season scoring higher based on my current numbers right now. Georgia wins this game. They lock up a spot in the East, and it essentially, well, it does lock up a spot. It locks up the conference championship game, Georgia, Alabama. If Ole Miss wins, it does leave the door open for Ole Miss to sneak through if Bama stumbles mightily, and Tennessee if they're able to pull off an upset or two to get to Atlanta. So Georgia can take all the projections out of it with a win at home, and my numbers suspect that they will.
Yeah, I think my final point on that would be what you just touched on. The thing that would scare me here from the Ole Miss perspective is that the one time they played a similar team to Georgia, which was at Alabama, not only did they lose, but outside of the first drive, they couldn't do anything offensively. So that would be my concern. That's probably what's going to end up keeping me off of a bet on Ole Miss in this game, because the offenses looked really good against everyone else, but against the one, kind of top tier team they played, the offense could not do anything. And if that offense can't get going, the defense isn't good enough to win them a game. So that's kind of my final thoughts here on this one. I'm definitely looking forward to it. Georgia kind of in a position like we talked about with Washington, where here down the stretch, they've got a few pretty good games in a row. So we'll see kind of what kind of toll that takes on them here over the course of the next few weeks. And if they come out of that unscathed, then I have absolutely no problem with them being, number 1 in the country at that point.
It's just like Michigan. They got all their big opportunities here at the end, which we know, but hey, committee, yep, they haven't played those games yet. You can't just assume they're going to win. Like, we got to rank teams based on what they've done, right? And so to me, that's my biggest qualm too. It's with Michigan and Georgia, and the committee I don't know if they're just assuming they're going to win these games. They're just like, nope, they are the best teams, and this is what we're doing. Like, well, based on what? We haven't, they haven't been tested in that way yet. And I don't know. That's what I got. Ole Miss, how about, we didn't even talk about it. Ole Miss on the road at Alabama, on the road at Georgia in the same year. If I'm Ole Miss, I'm like, dude, what the heck?
Yeah. What did they do to the scheduling guys?
Brutal.
That's awful. Whoever scheduled that probably is the same person that scheduled Notre Dame to play like 8 straight games to start the season. So some terrible scheduling there for some of these teams this year. All right. Yeah. Again, looking forward to that one. That one's going to be awesome in deciding SEC, CFP fates for multiple teams, not just those teams. So the biggest one, we saved the biggest one for last. You mentioned it. Michigan going to Penn State. Obviously, a lot of off-field stuff going on with Michigan. We'll let that sort itself out. Kelley, I'll let you do the honors here. I am probably as excited for this game as I have been for any college football game this season, just because we're going to learn, sadly, in week 11, we're going to finally learn something about this Michigan team.
You should be excited, Tyler. 9.9. That's the watchability score here. Remember, that's on a scale of 0 to 10. It's hard to get any better than this game. It's the number 2 game of the entire regular season based on my current numbers, behind only the game, Ohio State at Michigan here in a couple weeks. I am very, very excited for this one. Everybody should be, even if you're not a Big Ten fan. If you love college football, this is a game that you need to have your eyes on because it is going to be a blockbuster matchup. I just hope it lives up to the hype. I think it can. I think it will. It's going to be fantastic. For the third straight week, I've got Michigan number 1 in both my power ratings and my relative scoring margin metric. The Wolverines are outscoring their opponents, Tyler, by 15.3 points per game, more than would be expected of the average top 25 FBS team against Michigan's schedule. So I just got done saying, hey, Michigan hasn't played anybody, and I don't think they deserve to be ranked in the committee's top 4. And I don't. I've written about that. I've talked about that extensively. But what Michigan is doing, to their credit, is they are dominating the schedule they're playing more than any other team is dominating the schedule they are playing relative to what would be expected if you view it all through the common lens of the average top 25 team. So Michigan is absolutely getting credit in my most deserving formula for dominating its schedule, but that's a smaller component than what have you actually done against your schedule in terms of win-losses relative to expected. And Michigan just hasn't had the opportunities to really impress on that side yet. It's not necessarily their fault. You do control your non-conference, I understand, but I know how that works. So they got opportunities here coming up, and it starts with Penn State, and it's going to be great. And if Michigan wins, they're going to shoot up my most deserving rankings without a doubt. In the preseason, I projected the Wolverines to have the number 3 defense and the number 8 offense. This defense is now number 1 in the entire country. They've spent nearly half the season leading the country on that side of the ball, and the offense is number 5 for me for the third straight week. Like, this team, I had high expectations, and this team has exceeded those. Again, that goes back to how much they're dominating against the competition relative to what would be expected. It's a robust, balanced football team. If Michigan continues playing this way against Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State, and to close the year down the stretch, they will put themselves in a position, Tyler, to finish number 1 in my power ratings for the first time since 1964. Had to go back into the historical numbers and say, when's the last time Michigan was number 1 at the end of the year? 1964. So this Wolverine team is having an absolutely phenomenal year, and they have a chance to start proving what they've got, the talent against other good teams starting this week. For Penn State, they have a power rating rank of number 4, and they will be Michigan's most formidable opponent of the season so far. It's really not even that close. Right now, based on current numbers or time of the game, whichever one's better, as I do, the Wolverines' next highest power rated opponent that they played so far is number 45 Rutgers, and they got them at home. So this is number 4, and it's on the road. I mean, this is Happy Valley. It's one of the most challenging environments for visiting teams in all of college football. Michigan should probably feel a little grateful that this is the big noon kickoff game, and they're not playing it at night, because then it would only be more challenging. It just is. That's how environments work in college football. We know this to be true. But Fox comes in and says, we're putting this game at noon. All right, I'm not going to complain because it's a great game. Let's do it. Penn State's been in the top 5 of my power ratings all year. Nittany Lions are currently number 3 in that relative scoring margin metric that Michigan's number 1 in, and they have the number 4 defensive unit in the country. Again, Michigan's defense is number 1. So Penn State, they're right there on pace with Michigan in a couple of areas, which is why I think this game is going to be so good. Penn State's only finished the season outside the top 4 of my power ratings once since 1994. That was in 2017. Inside the top 4, I should say. That was in 2017. They finished number 3. Nittany Lions have the potential to be the best team in the decade here. The question's going to be, is this Penn State offense, which is number 22, are they going to be able to score enough points to win this game? The only other game this season in which Penn State didn't have a big talent advantage, Tyler, was when they went on the road and played at Ohio State. The Nittany Lions could only muster 1 touchdown in that game. It came late in the fourth quarter, if you remember. At some point, I think this narrative of James Franklin can't win the big games is going to flip, just like it did for Jim Harbaugh in 2021. We've talked about this on the show before. It's going to continue until it doesn't, just like it did for Harbaugh. And is this the game that it can flip for James Franklin? Maybe, maybe not. Starting next year, we do away with divisions in the Big Ten, and he won't have to play Michigan and Ohio State every single regular season. Maybe it changes at that point when he doesn't have to play them both every single year. I don't know. I just think he's too good of a coach for it not to. Maybe it doesn't. But I just have a gut feeling that it will. This could be that game, but my numbers aren't sure. I project Michigan -1 only. It's a 53% win expectancy for the Wolverines. Ohio State's been my favorite in the East by the model to win the East every single week from the beginning of the year. It started because Ohio State was projected as the best team out of that group. as Michigan has gradually caught up to and now surpassed the Buckeyes and are extending their lead, Ohio State has remained number one, largely because they've already played Penn State. If Ohio State wins this, or if Michigan, wins this game, they will be my favorite in the East now, given that they are the better team than Ohio State by my power ratings, and they have that game at home coming up against the Buckeyes. So Michigan, this is huge for Penn State. You win this one, and they're going to be talking about this 3-team tie like it's nobody's business. And we'll have a real chance because all Michigan would have to do is hold serve at home against Ohio State. And then we go deep into the tiebreakers of how many wins do your West opponents have. I think it's going to be crazy. So Michigan can avoid all that with a win this weekend. Penn State, of course, going to have that home crowd behind them, Tyler. It should be a good one.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. So I also have Michigan number 1 in my power ratings. I also have Penn State number 4 in my power ratings. Michigan on both sides of the ball, top 5. I've got them number 4 on offense and number 2 on defense, only behind Ohio State. Penn State, number 5 on offense, number 7 on defense. So every unit in this game is top 10 by my numbers, is top 7 by my numbers. Michigan, despite their strength of schedule, they still are number 4 in my resume rankings because, like you mentioned, they have just dominated who they've played against. Whereas Penn State, with the one loss, they're number 10 in my resume rankings. So this is still a top 10 matchup, even if you want to look at it, from like a CFP committee type lens. I project Michigan minus 3.5 here. The line currently sitting minus 4.5. I project the total at 53.5, and it's currently sitting at 45. So I show a lot of value here on the over. And I'm going to have to look at that. I may end up betting the over here. I think Michigan is going to be able to score. And Penn State, last week, I know it was Maryland, but man, they finally, it wasn't that they scored in the 50s against Maryland that really impressed me. It was they finally started like throwing the ball more than 3 yards past the line of scrimmage and letting Drew Aller like be a quarterback. And I think if they do that in this game, Michigan had, if there's one flaw that the Michigan defense has shown, like you're not going to be able to grind out drives against them, I don't think, but when they have given up points, it's been on explosives. So if Penn State can hit some explosives, I think that's their formula for staying in this game. If they can't, Michigan might suffocate the life out of them, and it might not be pretty. That's going to do it for our marquee matchups. Let's hit some rapid fire. Oh,
I just want to hop in to give you, again, I'm not doing the betting because of the day job and all that, but we had Ed Fang, the power rank, on as our guest on We Hate Your Team this week. His best bet on the show was Michigan Penn State over. That was the one on the whole slate. Anything you can do, size, totals. He said my best bet. I think it's going to go over the number that you talked about there. And so if that makes you feel any better or gives you that motivation, that edge to pull the trigger on it, Ed Fang over at the power rank said that's his best bet of the week.
Yeah, well, if Ed Fang co-signs it, I'm probably going to be on it. That's probably a good bet then. All right, let's hit some rapid fires around the country. Not a ton of G5 games really to speak of this week, so we're going to keep this mostly Power 5. Kentucky and Alabama. Alabama, obviously, coming off a big win against LSU last week. I project Alabama minus 12. The line currently sitting minus 10.5. I project the total at 48, and the total is currently sitting at 46.
Yeah, I've got Alabama minus 14 in this game. They're my number 5 power-rated team. They're my number 4 most deserving. Kentucky, for me, power-rated number 36. So I know it's on the road in Lexington. Alabama coming off that win against LSU. So they have to avoid against a letdown for sure. But my numbers, this Alabama team, they've been here, done that, and they still have everything in front of them, and they know that. And I think they're going to get it done here on the road at Kentucky.
Next up, Oregon State hosting Stanford. Oregon State, a 20.5-point favorite. I project them as a 23-point favorite. I project the total at 51.5, and the over-under currently sitting at 54.5.
Yep, I'm right there with you. Oregon State minus 23.5. To me, this is a top 20 power-rated team. I have them number 22 in my most deserving rankings. I think the committee has them number 12. This is my most over-ranked team. If we really dive into their schedule, we can get into the merits of where should they be ranked. But in terms of this game, I absolutely expect Oregon State to dominate. 95% win expectancy. The only thing that would concern me a little bit, Alabama is coming off a big win. Oregon State, they've got a big one next week against Washington at home. Let's hope they're not peaking ahead for Beaver's sake. But yeah, I got them minus 23.5, 95% chance to win.
Yeah, I read about this in one of my articles this week, and I mentioned that I called Stanford pesky. I mean, they're kind of coming alive here,
Mm-hmm.
including the upset last week. TCU hosting Texas. Texas again coming off a big overtime win. I project Texas minus 12. The line currently sitting Texas minus 10. I project a total at 51, and the over/under currently sitting at 54.
I'm right there between you and Vegas again, Tyler. Texas minus 10.5 for me. Texas is my number 8 power rated team. They're number 5 in my most deserving. So a very deserving resume. Their only loss, of course, neutral site to Oklahoma. TCU is going to be, I mean, it's a big test. I have TCU power rated number 28. That's a team that people have given me kind of some grief for. Why is TCU still in your top 30? I still think they're a pretty good team. Texas has to go on the road here. I don't think this is a trap game or anything. Texas, though, coming off of the Kansas State win, an emotional win, an overtime win. Now they got to hit the road. Stay focused, Texas, because just like Alabama, everything's still in front of you this season, and you've got a lot to prove as well down the stretch here to convince the committee that your resume is worthy of the top 4, top 5, like I'm suggesting right now. That loss, even though it's not a bad one, although it's looking worse every week if you want to view it that way, that's holding them back right now. So Texas, to me, minus 10.5, 77% chance to win the game.
This is one I'm particularly interested in. UCF hosting Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, obviously red hot right now. They really turned their season around. They're currently a 2.5-point favorite. I project them as a 2-point favorite, and I might end up betting UCF here. I think this is a really good spot for UCF, who's been okay. They beat Cincinnati by 2 last week. I think situationally, and the number slightly agrees, I think UCF is probably the play here. Over/under currently sitting at 64, and I projected at 56.
By no means am I rooting against Oklahoma State to make the Big 12 championship game. I am nervous for Oklahoma State this week, though. I have it as a pick 'em. It's a 52% chance that Oklahoma State wins this game on the road. I have Oklahoma State power rated number 30. It's the best they've been all year. They're in the top 20 for me now in the most deserving rankings. Again, the best they've been all year. UCF's number 42 in the power ratings. I don't think UCF's actually as bad as their record indicates. I think there's still some talent on that team. They're at home in this one. Oklahoma State coming off the Bedlam win. You talk about emotional wins. It doesn't get any more emotional than what Oklahoma State had last week in a very competitive game. Oklahoma State has a 52% chance to win. So my numbers would lean that way. But Oklahoma State has to be focused and ready for this one. They close with at Houston and home to BYU. The numbers are going to like them by a lot more in those games than this one. If Oklahoma State can get past UCF, they'll have a very good chance of making it to Arlington. They just have to be ready for this game. I think enough people are saying it's a tricky game that they will. I was a little worried when I saw my line. I was like, oh, I don't know anyone's talking about it. They're talking about it now, as you did. Oklahoma State needs to focus, and I think they can get it done.
Yeah, that's one where I expect the public to be heavily on Oklahoma State there, just because they're so hot and coming off the Bedlam win. Last rapid fire here: Oregon hosting USC. USC off the emotional loss to Washington. We saw Caleb Williams after the game showing emotion. Like I said, I challenged them before that game. I wondered if they were even going to show up for that game. They did. However, it looks like they left it all on the field. I am very curious how they show up here this week. I think Oregon might roll. I project Oregon minus 19. The line currently sitting at 15. I project the total at 66. Ha, right. Don't bet this under. Over/under currently sitting at 73.5. I want no part of a USC under. I can't remember the exact stat, but I think they're like 17-1 to the over in their last 18 games or something crazy. So all of the trends and numbers that I've thrown out over the course of the last year or two don't, as far as high totals, don't apply to USC because they just continue to be crazy good on offense and terrible on defense. So don't bet this under.
That has been the story with USC, Tyler. You're absolutely right. Oregon minus 12.5 here in this one for me. Oregon's power rated number 3. I think they're a really good team. They're number 2 in my relative scoring margin metric. They have the number 1 offense in the country. The defense is up to a season best number 17. USC, you talked about some of the turmoil. Listen, I knew, we all knew that the front half of USC schedule wasn't hard and they wouldn't be tested until they get to Notre Dame in game number 7. There's a real chance here that they're going to lose 4 out of 5. And even with how tough the schedule is going to be, there's no way I would have thought in the preseason they'd lose 4 out of 5 here on the back half with still another tough game against UCLA to come. It's been disappointing. It feels like a missed opportunity with such a great offense and a returning Heisman Trophy winner and people's kind of consensus number 1 pick in the NFL draft. But hey, it's life. It happens. Lincoln Riley's going to learn from it. They've made some moves over there, and we'll see what happens. They could inject some life into that defense this week with the move that they made. I don't know if it's going to be enough to actually pull off the upset. Oregon knows they have to continue to be perfect to put themselves in a position to make that CFP. I think they will. They're at home. Oregon minus 12.5, 82% chance to win. If USC wins, though, like I said, it muddies the waters there for that number 2 spot in Las Vegas. It could make it very interesting coming down the stretch. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yep. All right, that's going to do it for our Week 11 preview. Enjoy it. We've only got a few Saturdays left, so enjoy it. Hopefully, everyone makes some money. If you're betting these games, we enjoy interacting with you guys on X. Talking numbers, talking betting, whatever. Make sure you follow him at KFord Ratings. Follow me at T-Shoe Index. And one thing, Kelley, tell people where they can find your new merch that just dropped this week.
Yeah, that's right, man. Hey, thanks. You can find it over KFordRatings.com. We've got some merchandise that's up there. Dropped earlier this week. It's been cool to see the orders rolling in, kind of going all over the country with it. But yeah, you can find it KFordRatings.com right there on the homepage. There's a link to the merchandise. A few offerings for right now. We'll see how it does and what offerings we might be able to do in the future. But I appreciate you being able or letting me plug that there, Tyler. That was nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I gotta get my merch as well. All right, that's going to do it. We will be back next week to recap what we saw in Week 11. Look ahead to Week 12. You know the routine by now. Thanks for sticking with us. Make sure you get subscribed on the Saturday Glory YouTube channel, your podcast platform of choice. For Kelley Ford, I'm Tyler Shoemaker, and that was Calculated Risk.